pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Marty, if you would.
Mary Jo Rasmanowski. Mary Jo Radcliffe. Here. Tom Epps. Troy Webb.
Here.
Nick Helsted.
Here.
Ann Deemer. Here. And Brad Dobbs.
Here. And has this meeting been properly noticed?
Yes, it has.
All right. Because we have a number of visitors with us tonight, I move that we move items 5.4, 7.1, 7.4, 8.2, and 6.1 in that order to the beginning of the agenda this evening.
Second.
Further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, so that puts us in public comment, 5.4. We have two speakers tonight. First we'll have Deb Bergal, please.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's a little bit hard for me, but I want all of you to know how extremely disappointed and angry I am by the treatment this school district has inflicted on my daughter, Laura Czar. Regardless of the fact that the principal happened to be gone in a meeting, I do not believe he should have emailed her when he returned and put her on administrative leave, basically banning her from school, but should have had a face-to-face meeting immediately with Laura and the student. Those were not Laura's words. The only contact she had was a phone call from him while she was on her way to help her brother, who was literally dying from brain cancer. Since the family chose to go directly to social media, she has been berated by total strangers from coast to coast. We all know things can be recorded, but they can also be deleted, and that is exactly what happened here. She simply repeated what the students said. Native Americans do in fact receive per cap when they graduate, but don't we want all of our students to do their best? Laura sure did. Or do we simply just pass them along? Isn't this the job of school staff? To try and get our students ready to face the real world? I don't believe there really was much of an investigation. Were other class members even questioned? I think our school would just like it all to go away. But unfortunately for Laura, it's never going to go away. It's still on the school's website. It's still on Facebook. It's never too late for the entire truth to be told. So Laura has now lost her reputation and her livelihood over portions of a 9-second video. I don't believe the student knew things would go this far, but she could have stopped it at any time. Laura didn't bring a weapon to school or threaten anyone with bodily harm. She's the least racist person you would know, with a Native American, African American, and Muslim friends. In fact, her son's best friend in and out of school, who spends lots of time at their home, is a Native American. I do believe that the students, since students are now allowed their phones during school when they should be doing their work, that all staff should be equipped with video cameras so the entire truth will always be known. Because in this case, it is not known. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next is Patty Jacobson.
I have two brief things, and then I have a letter because I knew I couldn't get everything in 3 minutes. The first thing is I hope when you review the Code of Ethics, you also will review the letter that was sent to all of the board members last year from the Wisconsin Transparency Project. So I'm hoping you'll review that. Secondly, I have regarding school daycare. And as you know, I have a pretty good passion for children. I started out as a pediatric nurse and had worked in pediatric intensive care. And my intent is, and my concern is definitely for children. Let's see, here's my answer. One of the tragedies, I think, of daycare is that government regulation and fees and requirements have shut down many private in-home daycare centers. Those were small settings where children usually did pretty well. And I think putting children in a large daycare setting is much more difficult for them to get the attention and the personalized care. Secondly, I think I would like, as a taxpayer, the school district to focus on academics and to focus on student achievement. We need to work on that. And I'm not sure that this is the proper time for us to add another burden, to add another business, which is not related to academic achievement in grade school kids. We can argue how that best is achieved to get the students prepared for school, but I don't think daycare business in a school, which needs to focus on academics, is really a good idea. Not at this time. Anyway, I have a letter. Thank you very much. Thank you for your time. I appreciate all of you for all you do on the board. You're not. No,
Yes.
I'm getting one. There's another backside.
Are you okay? Okay, sorry.
Oh, I had one more thing. I'm sorry. One more thing. I also hope that you'll delay the decision. I hope you'll take some time to ponder whether or not the administration and Shelley should go forward with this. I hope you talk to people who are retired, who are taxpayers, stay-at-home moms, who are often ignored in this discussion. And I think that they have an important point of view as well. So I'm hoping that you'll table this, at least for one more meeting, and do a little more investigating. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, that concludes public comment. Next, we're going to move to 7.1. This is the WIA annual resolutions. Andy Rosengard here to just answer questions. Correct, Andy?
Correct. Yep.
So just for everyone's frame of reference, the WIA each year, just like WASD does, there are different resolutions that are brought forth by different membership schools. WIAA has several longstanding committees that have been working on some of these projects. I think the Competitive Balance Committee has been the one that has been working for perhaps the longest time, and just to reframe what that is, and to be very clear, WIAA Board of Controls are elected positions, so those people that are on that Board of Controls that work through some of these committees have been elected by their regional counterparts. But the competitive balance has been a long time discussion as a means to there is a perceived inequity between private schools who get to compete in much larger conferences all season, and then when they get to tournament play, they compete against much smaller schools and are often very, very successful. So the idea behind it is that the state tournament is very heavily leaning towards private school participation, whereas they are a small minority in the grand scheme of number of schools, is kind of that idea behind it. Would you want to talk us through a little bit of that competitive balance proposal?
Sure. So Shelley pretty much hit it on the head there. There's been a lot of complaints about those private schools having that advantage over the public schools that are similar in size. So what they're talking about is having like a point system, and not just for private schools, but for all schools. So if you're very, very successful in volleyball or other sports and you receive points, let's say you win a state championship, you receive a certain number of points, and that can actually bump you up a division. So let's say you're in Division 4 for volleyball. If you receive enough points, you will go to Division 3 the next year. And then once those points come, then you can go back down again. So one of the big things that the WIA talked about is like, you're going to have a really, really strong team, let's say, for 3 years. You bump up, and then you have a drop off of all those seniors, and you're competing in that higher division and won't be successful anymore, so you'll drop back down. So this is across the board. It's not just going to be for private schools, it's going to be for all schools.
So how likely do you think that will happen? That there will be
Very likely.
Very likely? Because
very
that's what
likely.
people have talked about to me is.
Right. It's a start, and then it can be adjusted, but it's a start.
There have been so many different models looked at from different states, and this is the one that truly applies to all schools, right? If you are successful, that is your point system, as opposed to there've been lots of multipliers based off of your free and reduced percentage of population and all of those different things. And so this one kind of takes your student demographics out of
It
it
does.
and makes it all about your performance over time, right? Is it a
Over time, it's 3 years.
Yeah.
It's a 3-year time frame.
My question is, how geographically is still going to be a factor, obviously, too. But how do so basically when you move in divisions, you'll be playing in different locations all the time. Is that correct?
Correct.
So then it's going to change.
Once you get to your playoffs,
Yeah.
it's not going to affect your regular season at all.
Okay.
It won't change anything there. But once you get into the playoffs, then it'll affect where you are and who you go to or who comes to you.
That's it. Okay.
And those already have some longer travels, right?
Yeah.
By the time we get to regional
sure.
sectionals, there's longer bus rides. It may have been a easy conversation here, but I don't think you have any concept of the number of hours that have been discussed. I'm not on the WIA board, but our representative is the superintendent of Whitehall, and superintendent in Arcadia is also on that committee. And I mean, years and years and years they've been talking about some kind of competitive balance. So
Very, very, very intense debates throughout the years. I think it's a lot of strong feelings on both sides. That's the biggest one.
does anyone have any other questions about any of the other proposed resolutions?
Well, that was definitely the one that had the most time put into it. That was, it took me a while to do the math and figure out what one would need to do to move up or down. So,
And then they do have that the competitive balance appendix, and I don't know if you guys have
Yeah,
a chance to look through that at all.
Yeah.
Okay. Yep. That gives a pretty detailed version of it all.
Perfect. Awesome. Thanks so much for coming in.
Thank you very much.
Since Andy doesn't join us much, would it be appropriate to just share what a fantastic job he's doing? When last week you got to have all of our spring sports, and now this week we're digging out from under 18 inches, and he gets to reschedule literally everything. Literally everything. He's doing a fantastic job in this role.
thank you. All right, next we have 7.4. That's the FCCLA. Taylor's here.
It would only be in the Google folder, sorry.
Mine shows locked.
Oh, you just shared it with me and Marty?
Yep.
That's going to be a problem.
That's okay. I didn't think of that one. So this year we were really successful at FCCLA State, and we had quite a few qualifiers between both the high school and middle school chapters. What happened was we had 17 qualify for nationals within the high school chapter, and then we had 8 qualify within the middle school chapter. So another really successful year for us at the state level, which is super exciting. This year we have FCCLA Nationals, which is our National Leadership Conference taking place in Denver, Colorado. Our travel days right now are looking like July 1st through the 6th. And at that time, we will be looking at our travel dates right now, and I just had a conversation with Sarah Halverson this morning, and we are talking to parents, looking at pricing, figuring out who will go. 2 of the high school teams that qualified were our Parley Pro teams, so if you go back, you'll see the picture of it. So we had really large group, really large numbers qualify for state this year at the high school level, one of the biggest we've had in the past couple of years, which is awesome. We had both of our Parley Pro teams qualify. Neither is looking to go to nationals, but it's still a great success that they have made it that far. And then down in my middle schoolers, we've got 8 of the 10 that competed qualified for nationals, which is a huge feat. In order to qualify for nationals, you have to be the top 2 in the entire state within your category. So that's a big feat that we had that many qualifiers. So 19 in school. And then this is what we're looking at for nationals price breakdown at the moment. After talking to Sarah this morning, we're hoping to make final decisions by Wednesday, knowing what students will want to go, of course pending your approval, of who would go and what that will look like for us. So there's many different travel options. This is not my first time taking students to Denver. When I lived in North Dakota, I did this every summer for a long time. So this is not new to me. So if you have any questions for me, I have to answer for you.
So how will the families pay for that?
So nationals is something that families pay for. If there's interest in doing a fundraiser, we can do that as well. Throughout the year, other students at the high school level specifically will work different concessions and things like that and build up money for their SCCLA account. Most of that was used for the state level because you don't always bank on going to nationals. So we would probably do some more specified fundraising for the nationals.
So this will be a non-cost to the district, it's just approval to go.
Correct. Non-cost to district approval go. That's it.
Great that somebody made it. Awesome. Any motions for this?
We will need a section first.
I make a motion to approve the FCCLA students going to nationals.
I'll second it.
Any further discussion? All right, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Taylor. Right. Next up, put my notes here. 8.2, a couple more guest speakers this evening. Talk about Narcan availability in our schools.
I'm Elizabeth Johnson, I'm a school nurse, and I'm first going to tell you what Narcan is, if you're not aware of it. Narcan is an opioid antagonist. Naloxone is the generic name for it. It blocks the brain's uptake of opioids by replacing them. While it's a rescue medication like EpiPens, it's a completely different type of drug with completely different action. What we would stock in the school is the nasal spray. It comes in different forms. We'd only stock the nasal spray. This is a preloaded nasal spray. It's easy to use, and it really cannot be given incorrectly. Narcan saves lives, and it's an important thing to have in our emergency response toolkit. If given to someone who is not having an opioid overdose, no harm will come to that person. It's which is similar to EpiPens. There's no harm when it's given to somebody who doesn't need it. But if not given to someone who is in an opioid overdose, that person could die. And we will have a standing order from our medical advisor for naloxone, like we do for our EpiPens and other medications. So then,
if anyone doesn't know, I'm Kent Wyman, the Buildings and Grounds Supervisor. The program that we reached out to, they would actually, it's called naloxone, and they are for providing safety and harm reduction in the communities across the state. They would provide us with the boxes, and we would install them ourselves. We'd probably put them right between the AED machine and the citizen, first responders kit, so it would just be considered another safety item in the school. We would put them in, the techs would actually have to connect us. So there's like, they're wireless, but there's communication between the box. So every time the box opens, they would have a notification. Elizabeth gets an email just so we know that someone has been in the box, and then we can restock the box with more Narcan. We would have, I believe, a small stock on us in the district to restock. They made a point of, they don't care if someone takes it and brings it home. Maybe they have trouble at home, they know of a parent that's an addict, or they have a sibling one. They just kind of want that Narcan in the public. Like I said, the boxes are monitored, so they can tell if it's been opened. We would replace with another one. There's no cost to this program. We would be looking at having one in each of the 5 school buildings, and maybe some available here at the district office, if some should happen outside, and at the bus barn. Currently, the Department of Health and Human Services has a box in their lobby.
and just to kind of inform you a little bit more, the opioid crisis has taken a new turn. It used to be heroin and prescription pills, OxyContin, Vicodin, Percocet people were getting their hands on, that sort of thing. But now there are a number of counterfeit pills that are coming in that are laced with fentanyl. These are unregulated and sometimes contain a deadly amount of fentanyl in just one pill. Kids may not be, in fact, a lot of adults cannot tell the difference between a counterfeit pill and a regular prescription pill, and that can result in an overdose. And I've got some handouts from that about one pill can kill. There's it's like a 2 page.
So these are actually just out in, I'll say the public, they're not in a nurse's office?
Correct, they're in a box similar to the AED box that can be opened
In each school?
in each school, yes.
So these are not alarmed boxes, then you're saying, like a lot of the AEDs, I know, like you open them and there's the strobe or
Right.
these
No,
are silent
they're not,
open.
yeah, they're not alarmed, they're not video monitored. They are monitored in terms of when it's open, that way the company can tell if, and they said there's a very high percentage of people who are just curious, who just open it up to look at it and close it back up but don't take anything. So they can, that's where I would come in and check to see if it's been taken, report that back to them, so.
We had a same thing when we put the first responder box up with a safety kit up. The kids at the middle school especially wanted to see what was in it, but now they haven't opened it in a year. They were really curious at first.
How do the elementary principals feel about having those in their building? Have you talked to them?
No.
There's not been conversation yet.
Oh, okay.
They could be in the offices too. It doesn't
Yeah.
have to be out in the hallway. It could be in the nurse's station.
In the elementary schools, I'm thinking.
My guess on the elementary level is the kids won't pay any
Right.
attention to it.
And so the elementary levels aren't always used as much in the evening either as the middle school, high school that have a high community traffic in the evenings.
I would feel more comfortable if the elementary ones were in the offices.
So we've been around to a lot of schools, obviously, like sporting events and whatnot, and we've started to notice them, and a lot of times it's AED, and they have their Narcan or an EpiPen available too, and then there's their like first responder box.
Interesting.
Seems about half the schools now.
The advantage of having them with the AED is that we designate that as that these are our emergency response things, and then they are accessible when we do have events. And community events are sometimes held, like particularly Red Creek, and after school programming, anything like that.
Have we ever had to use Narcan on anybody yet? I mean,
We don't have it.
We don't have it yet.
Yeah,
to
we
use.
We don't have any of it yet.
No, we do not.
Okay.
I do not believe we've had a student in crisis.
I have not, since I've worked here, it's my 8th year here, and I have not had a student at that point, but I'm well aware that it could happen. And anytime it might not necessarily be a student, it might be somebody coming to visit or, that sort of thing.
Are you aware of many districts in the state or I guess anywhere that are having to use this?
I know that a number of districts do stock it. I've been asking around my school nurse group. I know Melbourne stocks it, and several other ones, even in the Cooley region, do stock it. I don't know if anybody's had to use it. I'd
rather we didn't, but
You're right, exactly.
Yeah.
that's not what we have it.
Yeah, I know. I asked over at DHHS if they have had to restock it. They have had to restock it, so that's probably been people taking it for future use. The thing is that we may have students that have some situations in their home or community life where they would have a better peace of mind knowing that they have that tool, to just go ahead and take it, and they would be able to, to do so under this program.
Does it drug have a long shelf life, or does something get to rotate out every once in a while?
I'm not sure what the expiration date is on it, but the company will watch that, and they'll, replenish us when it does expire.
So is it like a subscription-based cost then, as well, or is it as a community? Is it
No cost.
No cost to
less,
us,
they
no.
just-
It's
just
the UW Madison is kind of the right. Is it
Yeah,
the program through Madison.
Yeah, it's called Wisconsin Voices for Recovery, and they are pushing this out. There's they put boxes in at least at UW Madison. They're in all the dorms, and I'm sure they're working on the other college campuses too.
There are some sad situations you hear about where somebody gets into something like that. And
And I think
Yeah.
that was one of the pushes that the speaker was talking about is it doesn't have to be an addict. It can be the first pill that a person's taken, or it can be accidental.
Yeah, I'm talking to local law enforcement. It's definitely getting worse in this area.
Yeah, and it's definitely coming in. I know there was a story shared with me from a school nurse in the region of kids taking like a Hulk bars, which are a benzodiazepine, it's like Xanax but it's laced with fentanyl. It's one of these fake pills that not prescription pills, and so they had a pretty scary situation there in their school fairly recently. So it is it is around.
Right. So this item, we do need to take formal action, is that correct?
We would appreciate it, just so that you are very clear and aware of what is being stocked in those areas. And duly noted on the elementary preference to be in the nurse's station.
Oh, and I'll coordinate the training. We have to go with the DPI, a DPI regulated training for training staff members on the administration of the Narcan too.
So do we have to train 100% of our staff members, or how does that?
No, I would say probably our emergency response team would be who I would target for training, and whoever is interested too. I know DHHS has offered some free trainings recently for community members for this too. So it's definitely something to to be aware of and to have in our emergency response.
Have no discussion. Did you want to make a motion?
I think you're making a motion.
You want to make a motion?
I make a motion to accept the proposal for Narcan being offered in our schools.
I'll second.
All right, motion is second. Any further discussion or questions? Right, all those
Wait,
in
Nick's got some.
It's the only thing is it's kind of sad that you need it, and then that you somewhat kind of leery of offering the fix or not all over, because then it's more conducive to using the drug. But it'd be pretty sad if somebody accidentally took something and died from it. So it's kind of a double-edged sword, So.
Great.
Any further? All right. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you very much. Go enjoy the 16th birthday party.
All right. Next up, we have our social studies, high school social studies department.
Thank you.
I know I'm not here to throw and make amends or motions, but can we have our student go first?
Oh,
She
for
gets
sure.
a lot to shovel out to get here. And then
Absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely. Thank you for that, Eli. I did not. Thanks, Ava. Please come on up.
Did you want to follow us? Because this is going to be quite the act to follow. So. Just a quick report on student side.
Introduce yourself first, please.
I've been sleeping all day, so. Hello, I am Ava Gilberg. I am the communications director of our Student Senate. What we've done so far with our student diversity initiative is basically with our two permanent committees, the school environment and the political committee. We've created 3 new committees under our Student Senate. The Spirit Committee, which would deal with basically student morale, as our main concern is the environment that the student body is in. So with the Spirit Committee, they haven't been able to meet yet since they're fairly new, but a issue they are currently dealing with, not really issue, they are discussing about putting a club board in the high school commons, which clubs would be able to put advertisements or basically events or initiatives that they have themselves on that board, and people can just kind of walk by and take a look. The second one is the Education Committee. They've been trying to meet. Their main concern is the education of the student body and staff. Currently with like education on diversity and like ways to work together and disciplinary methods that would possibly work, because suspension isn't really a thing that people take seriously. So they're currently working on a bunch of different ideas. Our third committee is the diversity committee, which they haven't been able to meet yet. Their main concern is integrating diversity into the student body, which means like the integration of celebrating holidays other than Western holidays. So making students aware that there are more things to celebrate than just what we know, and ways to celebrate different ethnicities within the school district. Our most recent full Senate meeting was this past week. We mostly just talked about what can we do to get these committees going. Our elections for executive board for next year, and other plans. So currently I'm working on a timeline or plan of events that should be happening with this initiative that if I am not in Senate next year, people would be able to look at and follow if they want to still go through with the initiative, which hopefully they will. Then our secretary, Lillian Autumn, is working on basically like a committee guide for our new like committee leaders, since it's kind of a weird thing to be elected into a position that you don't really know how to run if you haven't run one before. So she's like an expert on parliamentary procedure. So I think that's about it.
Does anybody have any questions before Eva disappears?
The only question I have is, the committees sound very interesting, that once you get those going, I hope that you do report back to us what you're coming up with.
Yeah, we don't have a lot of time in the school year left.
It'll start next year, right?
Graduating, so that is if the president of next year's student senate decides to implement those committees and like they vote on it, because they're not permanent. So
thank you. Thanks for taking the time to come on a snow day.
That's awesome.
that's it.
Just for the record, Jenny put this together?
I did not.
All right, fair enough. Well, hello everybody. This is the social studies, one of the finer areas of study. That is our social studies department over there. I'll let this young lady introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Jenny Choplat. That's it.
Well, that was really good. If you scroll down to the bottom, that's me. I'm Eli Young Thunder. I teach AP, US History, World History, First Nations, Sociology next year, Economics next year. Over there with a goofy grin and the wonderful shirt, that's Mr. Mike Shepard. He does AP World History, Cartography, and Readings in History. And next to him, matching the shirt, is Brian Schleifer. He does AP Government, US, GP, US History. And this is Jenny. Okay, so this is the three-phase curriculum alignment, which I am sure everybody sitting here knows all about, correct? Oh, good, because I had no idea this even existed. But after looking at it, we kind of put ourselves in that 2 to 3 area. Right now, designing and planning, we've got some work to do as we get into the summer with some new courses. And then some of our classes are in that 3 where they are implementing. Mr. Shepard's been working a lot on that standard-based grading for a few years, so he's a little further ahead in some of his singletons. We still have a little bit of work to do in our world history and some of our core classes, but we're making some good progress right now. And this right here is just a quick snapshot. On the right side, these 6 skills are for our US and world history. I put those on there because that's one shared class. Like a lot of other departments, we have a lot of singletons, and so it's hard to have just one set. We haven't figured that out. We talked about that last week, I believe we were talking about some of those essential guarantees that maybe we can whittle down that each class could have in common, but we haven't done that yet. So those are the 6 we use in our 2 core classes: connections, perspectives, geography, methodology, reasoning, human movement, sourcing. That's a big one that we might jump across all. That's just the writing, that's the reading, and that is the ability to create an argument. And I put him up there because we don't need more of him out in the, I don't know if you guys like The Simpsons, but we want to make sure that we don't have a lot of him out in society. So some of our priorities in our social studies department is citizenship, civic values, communication. Within that, those are some of what we hit in our different classes. We're hoping when people, our students, get out to the community that they'll be able to have a broader understanding of the government structure. We try and hit both U.S. and also our tribal governments as well. Hopefully they have a better understanding of U.S. history so we can kind of see where we are today, some of the trials, tribulations we went through in the past, and then of course the world in general. As far as civic values, why it's important to vote, and of course, how does our government structure work, why it's important to take part, and why it's important to do what you need to do. That's why it was nice to see Ava over here standing up. And then of course, communication skills, reading, writing, and then within sociology, psychology, also how group dynamics work, and also how do people think. Am I adding anything at any time?
I think you're doing really great.
I don't think I'm doing great, but I'll keep going. Okay. All right, so if you guys have questions, current work, this summer we need to rewrite world history. It's needs some love, and I think Jenny says she loves world history, so I'm really excited that she's gonna take the whole.
I don't remember saying that.
But she thought about it. And then we also want to create a little more cohesiveness in our core classes. We've been doing a pretty good job of that with U.S. and World talking and getting some common assessments, but we want to make sure we solidify those for the future for our students. And then we also are quite busy in our department. We want to make sure that we can continue to take part in some of the following. The Wong-Shik-Wachek Student Senate, the Gay Straight Alliance, Student Government Day. Jenny's been bringing students down there to Jackson County the last couple of years. Wisconsin History Day, trying to get that connection back so we can get back over and judge. And then, of course, Jenny also helps with the after-school tutoring as well, so we want to make sure that that continues on. We would like more students, so any parents listening at home, can you tell? And we also need to continue on with the civics testing. If you hit the button again, you'll see some wonderful pictures. There's Student Government Day. You hit it again. Oh, wow, look at this. This was a real nice presentation that we did at Galesville Ettrick Trempealeau for their elementary kids. We had our Wong-Shik-Wachek come over and they delivered a great performance. It was wonderful. They all brought something good to the table to share. You hit the other picture again. We also tried to be inclusive. Even though it's Wong-Shik-Wachek, we do try and get non-native students to come in and join. And then I like this picture right here. There's Wilbur and his friend, and they brought in all their fun stuff for trapping and fishing and hunting. So the kids really enjoyed their presentation and their take on it as they kind of compared different cultures and how they go about doing the trapping for themselves and their families. It was a fun experience. And our next step, we just want to continue reviewing what we're doing, being reflective practitioners. We want to reassess where we're at, how can we get better, and that brings us to the conclusion. Got anything, Jay? Okay, I think that was really good. So if you guys ask no questions, we can all get out of here a little faster. So
I just have one question.
Is it a yes or no question? Okay.
Can you just refresh my mind? What classes are our students required to take out of that list?
So we do world history. We're actually changing it, so that's one thing that is changing. World history is now becoming required for the freshmen, and it in the past has been for sophomores. So next year, we are all 4 of us social studies teachers will be teaching world history. American history is required as well, but since the freshmen are mostly taking it now, we only need to offer a couple of sections of that next year. And then they're required to take USGP. Mr. Schleifer teaches that class right now. So like all of us will teach the required classes, like world history, American history, and those are that's 2.5. And then, is there another one that I'm missing?
Nope, they just need to have 3, so then it would be.
3 total, so then they
So-
need another one. That's where we get a lot of, I have, for instance, I teach law and society. I get all different grades in that class. I get a lot of freshmen because they can't get into certain classes, so they can get that social studies half credit done. I also teach principal psychology elective class, and that one, usually you gotta be a sophomore or older to get it because it's a little bit more challenging for younger kids. But the AP classes, they can take as young as freshmen, so you have like AP US History and AP World History. They can take that younger and keep building up the AP credits, so there's a lot of AP opportunities for the kids in social studies.
One thing I was wondering, I just saw that the state level mock trial competition wrapped up recently. Is there any interest in that within our district?
Yeah, I think Jimmy would really like to run a club out of that, Mr. Batson.
I was noticing that it says Law and Society next to her name, and I noticed you've been volunteering her for things.
Yes,
So
but Benny is never coming to the board again with Eli.
Yes. I texted and I'm like, would you like me? He's like, yeah, if you want to. Okay, so I mean, that I know that I saw at Government Day there was Melrose kids had that on, so that must be some local schools have that. We can see if the kids are interested in it. We've been kind of talking up that it would be great to be able to go on some field trips for a social studies department, maybe kind of incorporate art and social studies together if there were some things we could do together. So to kind of generate more interest in our department, I guess.
Yeah, we talked about throwing together like a history club of some sort. I know a few years ago before COVID, we were working on, what was that, civics test, the civics club kind of we had. So over there a couple of years, we got kids, and it was just basically general knowledge, trivia.
There was a statewide trivia,
Yeah.
yes, it was, I think it was like 2 years
it was,
before.
Yeah, it was a civics club, but then COVID hit, and then they
Went
canceled,
away.
and I think they got it back this year, but I don't know what the participation rate was. And so yeah, history club, we thought about something to try and garner more interest, but we'll talk Jenny into it.
I have a question. So you said rewrite world history. How are you going to do that?
Okay, I guess when I say that, like world history, it's like every year because there's so much world history.
It's different topics.
Yeah, that we always feel, at least I always feel at the end of each year, like we should have really had more on this. We should have had more on this. So we're really hoping that between the 4 of us that we can decide what are some significant areas of study that everybody should know. Because Mr. Schleifer over there, he does not like the rise of man. But I kind of like that whole Neolithic movement there, that's kind of fun. So we've got to decide, and I think with AP world history, they start when like 1200 or something like that. So there's the argument to be made we should include more of that early history because students won't get that elsewhere. But at the same time, you're taking AP World because it's kind of dual track. So as a freshman, they can come in and take World History or AP World. As sophomores, they can take US or AP US. And then as juniors, they can take AP Gov or USGP. So yeah, there's a lot to think about. I didn't mean rewrite history, but rewrite our curriculum. So if you guys have some ideas, we're open because it's
prioritizing, I guess, what we think the kids should learn about. A lot of times in history, we get kind of focused on just what's happened in Europe or in the United States, and we try to broaden their horizons a little bit. But it's a difficult balancing act because we need them to know a lot of different things. So just prioritizing, I guess.
And just while they're standing up here, I know we've had some conversations about gifted and talented programming. You just heard them talk about that at each of those levels, freshman, sophomore, and junior levels, they can take the core content class, or they could challenge themselves with an AP class. And so that is, we've talked for a long time about the idea that when students get to the high school level, there's a lot of self-selecting, whether they choose to challenge themselves at that next level or not. And good for the department for being aggressive about those trainings and stuff, because teaching AP is a different game than teaching the non-AP coursework, and so they spend an awful lot of time in preparation getting ready to do that well. Any other questions for them?
Where do you get one of those shirts?
He has 2 of them. He has one for Miss Slowey as well. It is weird. He will run to the office to go get the package that came in and immediately put his shirt on. He's gotten 2 so far this year, so
Oh, boy.
The bald head really makes it
I don't know,
though.
we could probably ask him, and if you guys want, we'd probably get you guys a matching set with Shelley on it or something.
Oh, gosh. Gosh, Eli, I think your time is up, my friend. Thanks for coming. Thanks for coming.
Let me know about the website.
All right.
You know, Eli, we did get shirts last year for the board for the district picnic. So
Oh, a hint
We'll let you
taken.
know.
Okay.
I'm probably next set. All right.
Thank you for your time.
That is the end of the topics we moved forward. Now we're circling back to 5.1. We have the oath of office to our newly elected board members.
I would like to administer the oath of office to our new board candidates. First, I'll take gift card, please.
Where do I stand?
Where would you like them from? Right here.
Front and center.
Here's what you're going to read. And I'm going to ask you to raise your right hand and read the oath of office, please.
I, Iftikhar Memon, having been duly elected to the office of Board of Education, School District of Black River Falls, swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States, the Constitution of the State of Wisconsin, and the School Board Member Code of Ethics, and will faithfully discharge the duties set office to the best of my ability. So help me God.
Congratulations and welcome to the board. We have to have you sign it and then I have to sign it. Can you do it in here?
You capturing me, I'm signing And my witness will sign too. Okay.
But it's nice to have them.
Oh yes, I remember this. Thank you.
Welcome again. And Jeanette? I'll give you your copy, and if you would also raise your right hand and read your oath of office, please.
I, Jeanette Simonson, have been duly elected to the office of the Board of Education, the School District of Black River Falls. Swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States and will faithfully discharge the duties of said office to the best of my ability. So help me God.
Okay. Did you read the whole one? Did you read this one?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay, this was a little long. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
Well, welcome to the board. I'm so sorry. And if we can sign that?
Yeah.
All right. And then next, for outgoing board members, we have our gift. This one's Anne's. And if you come on up. Well, thank you so much for your years of service to the district.
Very welcome.
Do a better job with the picture this time. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so then for everyone's information, so that the newly elected board members officially assume their seats 1 week from today. So Troy and Ann have still one more meeting tomorrow night, no more between now and then.
And I understand both of our new board members are headed down to CISA, and our next scheduled meeting is May 8th. May 8th, yes, May 8th is our next meeting where we will do the election of officers and reorganization and stuff. And so that will be your first time seated, unless unfortunately an expulsion or something comes up in the meantime.
On to item 5.2, review of the policy. So this needs no formal action this evening, but it is part of board policy that we review this annually at this meeting. So it is in your packet, and you have a copy here. Are there any questions or points of discussion?
One thing on number 10, it says right at the end there, it says and then nothing.
It goes right on the last one, and remember always that my first and greatest concern.
Okay.
I think that's how it goes.
Yeah,
it just goes on to the next ones.
Sure. I just don't know if that and should be taken out since it's like a number 11 and a number 10, or.
But that's like the end of it. If you look, there's a semicolon at the end of each one of them, and then that is coded to the last one. So
it's minor, really.
Yeah. And then just a reminder to all that last summer the group worked on a group of norms. That is not board policy. That was a separate conversation and created a separate document. The Code of Ethics has been board policy since 1980 when it was first adopted, and has been reviewed each year. And last time it was revised was 2003.
And it's framed on the wall.
And it's framed on the wall.
So if there are no questions on that one, we can move on. We're up to 5.3, gifts and grants.
All right. So our Skills USA, we heard a little bit tonight about another one of our CTSOs, our career and technical student organizations in the FCCLA. But the Skills USA is the tech ed version of a student organization, and last month we were able to accept a $42,000 grant from Ashley Furniture for STEM kits in the schools. This one is specifically $4,000 for the Skills USA group, and I asked Mr. School, who is the teacher at the high school that works with the Skills USA, and he said they currently have 12 high school members participating in competitions. And these students, they are competing in their state competitions next week on the 25th and 26th. And he said that his group has also helped with the empty bowls up at the high school when the FCCLA does that work, and also are looking to get more engaged in the greater community. So wanted to share that bit about the Skills USA group, and am pleased to recommend the $4,000 grant.
So I will move that we accept that.
I'll second that.
Further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? 5.5 district facilitated childcare.
All right, so I'm going to start off a little bit, and then Jill will likely chime in just a little bit. It's been many years that our community has been labeled as a child care desert. The district has been a part of those conversations since very, very, very early on. Jill is part of the original Child Care Network Task Force, and they have successfully written several grants. The district, probably 2018 or 19, did some work exploring other school districts around the state that have childcare that is associated with their district. And we stopped the conversation when COVID hit, and then it's been a slow restart up. However, another one of the board's pillars of the strategic plan is that community engagement pillar, and one of the goals under that is that community business partners. Every time we get our community business partners together, we hear about the child care crisis, and they all look to the school as, well, you guys do kids, why can't you help us fix this, right? We don't do that kind of kid work typically, but the reality is there are many schools across the state and nation who are finding ways to positively impact the child care crisis in their region. Our employers are having a hard time getting employees. It is now more affordable for a parent to choose to not work than it is to take some of the minimum wage jobs. And while you may think that's a great thing for the parent to not have to work, our business partners would say we're having a hard time staying afloat because we don't have enough employees. We are turning work away because we don't have enough active employees.
we certainly are a part of that challenge, that we struggle to have some of our positions filled because we know that childcare is a significant challenge. On top of that, we have been asked to do some additional research into why families open enroll out and choose other districts. And so we did that research. Of the 28 respondents, we had at least 6 of them that mentioned that they have childcare in other communities, and that is why they are taking their children out of our school district and attending other school districts who have wraparound childcare. So there's a lot of different terminology when it comes to childcare, and I certainly am not going to go through all those details because I don't have a proposal for you. We don't have an ask right now, but pre-COVID, we were at the point where we started to have conversations about, is this something we want to talk about, or is this not something we want to talk about? And Jill can certainly speak her own words, but she sits on that committee and feels like she's been sitting on her hands for quite a while, as the district has not been willing to take that next step and at least officially start exploring that conversation. So.
Yeah, I sit on that committee as being an employer in Jackson County. That's really my role on there. I'm on the board now. We have a Jackson County Child Care Network board that came out of the task force. We actually are a 501c3. As Dr. Severson said, we've written a lot of grants. It's hard because we're all volunteers trying to move forward, paying people who work in childcare better. I mean, that's one of the struggles, to get people to work in childcare, and solving all of our slots that we need to have for childcare. A lot of districts in the state have gone about it, and a lot of, not even just districts, but communities have gone about it in different ways. We've learned about communities that have business partners that do like a co-op, and they do the childcare that way. They have businesses that maybe pay for slots at childcare. There's just a lot of different ways to do it, and in Wisconsin, a lot of districts are using their Fund 80 levy, and that's something we talked about back in 2018-19 as well, that, you know, a levy across the whole Jackson County to help the whole greater good kind of thing. Yeah, so we continue to talk about it, and on this board, and our neighbors have been talking about it. Blair Taylor, of course, had a referendum. They have childcare right in their school district. Melrose and Elma Center are both talking about doing something similar. So it may be different models, but also looking at that. So we just thought it's probably time to talk about it again. And maybe if you're supportive of it, we would just dig in more and, you know, look at, you know, we believe we have people here on staff that have a lot of childcare issues as well, that range from non-consistent care to, who am I going to have to do this today? Grandma will do it today, but I got to find somebody else tomorrow, so kids are getting, or they're driving a half hour away to work in town and have to go drive a half hour to come back. So there's just a lot of examples of inconsistent or maybe not the quality early childhood type care as well. So not saying that all is bad. I mean, there are certainly some good ones as well, but so that is kind of where we were at, I hope.
So that Sherman Lake Community Childcare was one of the initiatives under that group as well. And so we have not offered anything on behalf of the district, and not that we have the opportunity to offer, but we haven't even asked for a study group or asked if there's other people interested. But people continue, like when we had that business partner luncheon, it was myself and then the city administrator and then the county supervisor, and all three talked about the loss of employees due to childcare. And I think our principals could share many times that staff members get pregnant and they leave us to move someplace where they have more family who can help with childcare. And that certainly may still happen because grandma childcare is still different than other kind of childcare. But when there is an absolute void and no other choices, I think the latest data from Marianne was 825 seats that Jackson County is still short in childcare. So we're not going to solve the crisis, not by a long shot, but can we use it as a recruitment and retention tool for our staff, and how can we help our business partners who are looking for that help and partnership? So, conversation about that.
Sure. Jill, who else is on the board who represents the part of the board? Is it just business partners, or is there any other like community members involved in that committee?
So we've had members from the Ho-Chunk Nation. We've had a lot of the organizations as well. We have some of the regulated childcare, like in-home providers, serve on that greater task force. I mean, there's like 20 people on that greater task force. On the board itself, we have 5 board members. 3 of them are from businesses and 2 of them are from childcare like group providers too. So we're incorporating those. We have legislators on our task force as well that Zoom in with us and listen to the conversations too. That's a quarterly type meeting.
So in other words, it's pretty cross-sectional across the community then as a whole, or is it? I'm just asking because people who aren't familiar with it like to know like who's driving this case basically, where the district should take a more stronger.
No one's
issue.
driving that right now.
Right, no one is right now. But well, I mean,
we're not driving.
We did up until 2019. It was discussed. It wasn't. It wasn't. You're not being assertive in the sense, but you still wanted the discussion about it, and that's why we're talking about it tonight, right? And so
many were invited. I'll
Yes.
answer your question. Many businesses were invited early in the early days through the first discussions. It came about by local businesses talking about it, not even. And then later, people were asked, "Do you want to join us?" There was a survey that came out. Do any of these things affect your employees? Blah blah blah. We surveyed our employees, so it's been a long time. But originally, it was we've asked the business community when they come to our business partnership meetings. Certainly, they're able to get involved if they want to be in the task force as well. So the invite's been out there. Has it been out there again in the last 6 months? Maybe. We just had our business partnership meeting, I guess, in March, right? Yeah, March. So that would have been part of the conversation here again. So I know Mary Ann Torkelson, she is the president of our network and the facilitator for the task force. She goes to as many community group meetings and things as she can as well. So.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So is the thought for like teachers and staff or for the community?
I guess that's what we'd have to look into, what the need, where's the exact need.
There are some
possible.
There are some districts that hold a percentage of the slots for their employees. There are some districts who their employees are in the lottery with everybody else who is applying for those spots. There are some that they first decide how much they can afford. Their employees still pay for the child care. They get all the slots and whatever is left, they open it up to community. So all of those things are options. There's a lot of school districts that are currently doing that, and so when we go to conferences and stuff down in Milwaukee, you frequently see districts that are presenting on their community-based child care models.
So I know like Blair Taylor added on for theirs. I was involved in that a little bit, but what do you know what is it?
What model
Community?
They passed a referendum to be able to fund it, and so Jill had mentioned something about a possible Fund 80. If it were Fund 80, it's not necessarily a referendum, but because they also needed to do facility renovations for it, they did a referendum for the facility renovations and partial funding, and then I believe they're using Fund 80 to supplement some of that. So.
I believe parents still pay tuition.
Absolutely.
I'm not. Everybody's clear.
I'm not aware of any school districts that do it as a service.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I feel the best case scenario would be for a private place to do this, but it's obvious that that's not. People aren't running out, just going nuts about it for some reason.
The business model is really hard because paying people the wages that you can afford without outpricing the care becomes really a challenge.
And that's where I was going to go with this. This is part of the, I know you want to investigate this further, and that's kind of what I was looking at, the cost benefit, basically. How much would we have to subsidize, essentially, this to, I think that's something that we can consider in the future. I won't be on it, but I think that's something to definitely consider. And also, the last part of it would be, too, is not partnering, but maybe getting how the current daycare providers that are businesses here in town or in our community as a whole, find out some of their struggles are, and maybe aligning with some of them as well. Is a private partnership or something like that, a private-public partnership or something like that. Because I can see how some people would feel that the school district taking over would create another issue. Was if it's subsidized, now you have competition that's going on with the private sector, and that could also affect a lot of people's livelihood as well. So That's, you gotta be careful how we do that, how
Right.
it goes about it.
There's enough kids that it doesn't have to be a competition, but you're absolutely right. We have to watch that funding model close to
Yes.
make sure it didn't feel that way.
And that's why we have all the regulated childcare that we, the people that we know, right, that are licensed or regulated, they're on that greater task force, and 2 of the 5 board members are group center directors. So, yeah, I mean, we all want to work together to solve it, not price anybody out or anything like that.
Well, this is a problem.
You go first. Ladies first.
This is a problem that's not going away. I was going to sessions on this at convention years ago, and then we just kind of let it go. So it's not going away. It's going to be here. It's not getting any better. You hear about it all over the country. And I think the school district, because we are in the child business, is an appropriate partner to use for, not that we don't want to absorb the cost, but I think we should be involved in some way in making this happen. And it's alarming to me that our neighborhood and communities are starting it, and we aren't, when you're thinking of school choice and how it does affect our enrollment. I think that if they are starting to do that, we are behind them, and we need to work on something.
And being competitive for businesses.
Oh, for
here.
businesses, for
it's
sure.
I've been going to these meetings about childcare for just over 4 years now, and it's the same stories. I'm sure it's the same ones you're hearing. We can't recruit employees because to get them from out of the area to here, they don't have childcare. So they're choosing to live. If they're choosing to work here, they're choosing to live in another community and commute, or we have a lot of people that are just choosing to stay home either because they can't afford daycare or simply cannot find daycare. They can't afford to stay home, but they can't afford daycare either. Or they can't afford to stay home, but they can't find daycare, so there's no other option. And I know of a number of staff, both within our district and employees outside of the district, that are driving from within our district to outside of our district to drop their children off, to turn around and drive back. And when we're talking half hour, 45 minutes round trip, now you're adding 3 hours to someone's day.
And if a job should open elsewhere.
Right, then So I think it's important that we're not looking to do anything that at this point other than to advance the discussion. I think that's important to do. I don't care who does it. It doesn't have to be the district. It could be anyone.
Absolutely.
But someone has to do it. If it has to be us, then it has to be us.
We would be good partners.
Right, absolutely.
Whatever.
Absolutely.
I feel.
Just the question I had was like, is there any part of the school working with like some of the childcare providers for like part-time work, like after school, or doing the what do you call it, the co-op stuff and stuff?
So Sarah Halverson teaches a class that I can't remember the name of it, but it certifies people as childcare workers. It's not a it's not a certification that the daycare centers can recognize. Is that what I'm understanding? Yeah. So they get through WTC childcare certification, but it's not one that our daycare centers can recognize because of regulatory reasons.
That's part of the problem with childcare, I think, is all the relations.
They could take
Not
the
that we're
2
gonna fix
courses, the infant and toddler and the strategies and curriculum. And if they would take those 2 courses, the daycares would recognize those 2.
I know that Sarah teaches infant and toddler. I don't know if the second one is articulated with WTC. That I'm unsure of, but I know infant and toddler is.
Yeah, it would be, I believe. It would just take more time and more staff to. But it would be nice for those students to be able to do field experience in an established center that would be closed, where they wouldn't have to travel a ways.
Yeah, I do think that they do get some supervisory hours where they can go in and visit, but they can't be employed, is what I believe right now. And we get a lot of the people who take that class who are working at BLAST as our student workers, and so they're doing a different type of childcare as they're tutoring on top of the childcare piece.
Yes.
I do think that the childcare shortages are part of the reason that BLAST has over 110 students on a nightly basis. The last time we had BLAST, we were I think it was between 40 and 50 kids a night. And the fact that we have 110 kids every night tells me that after school care is a big deal for a lot of families.
And that's already really partnering with families and providing that. So
For sure.
we are providing some of those services already, although we don't call it daycare.
And there's nothing in the morning. Like I know Melrose started a morning program, and so our neighbors are definitely ahead of us on this.
So what do you need from us?
I need to know if there's any board members who did not ever I wanted to know if a majority of the board was interested in us furthering the conversation. Can we go to these meetings and say, let's start digging into how other school districts are doing it? What do the models look like in many of the other districts around the state? What do those funding sources look like? What is a subsidized cost? All of those things. So just find out a lot more details as opposed to just the anecdotal stories that we hear about it.
Would that include possibly looking into a referendum of some sort too?
It could, depends on what is decided.
Yeah, I mean, we're a long ways from that conversation yet.
Would that, looking into it, does that involve you and Jill looking into it as a collective then?
Well,
joining her, what she's already.
So I won't go to those committee meetings either, but I can ask my colleagues, I can start reaching out across the state and asking what other kind of models exist and their funding, all of that stuff, just like Jill can. I'm pretty confident there's over 150 districts who are doing some type of childcare, so that's a large task, just to start pulling those together and figuring out what that is.
Aggregating this data and then basically presenting it back to the board.
Yeah.
Okay.
While Jill is sitting on the committee doing the work there.
I'm in favor of us investigating or continuing.
Same.
I'm staying on one. I'm staying.
Nick?
My opinion is, I prefer a private place to do it, but I think it's worth looking into, just because it is an issue, and it's not going to hurt to know more about it, and I guess try to make a educated decision.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I think it would be just good to look into it, because it's definitely a need, and we want to gain employees, not lose them.
That sounds like direction to me.
Perfect.
All right. 5.6, school and community pride. I think this is
Ms. Kenza's joining. So this conversation, as I shared with you, there's been some efforts in our building projects to do a lot more branding and to talk about school pride and that kind of thing. And so we did a lot of the facility work, and then again, we stopped inviting people into our schools for 3 years. And so it seems like a really heavy lift this year to bring volunteers back in and just have people visiting the schools again as those projects are winding up. And then Kim started a conversation completely out of the blue, and I'm like, that connects an awful lot to conversations that we had been having. So, sense of pride, and if you would just share some of the ideas that you've been kicking around.
All of them? No. So I got the opportunity, my kids are finally old enough, like in this area, that I'm going around to different schools and seeing kind of what they have in their buildings to show off the really great things that past alumni have done or honor them, as well as to honor our students in our building and kind of the history and what our current students are doing. So, you know, like students of the month, things like that. But the thing I think I'm supposed to talk about tonight is having a distinguished alumni program, right? So we have lots of people who have graduated from Black River Falls High School who have gone to do wonderful things in our community and outside of our community. And I want to take time to recognize those people, honor them, and have a place where our students can go and see the really awesome things that our community members have done in our area. So there's lots of different ways different schools have done this. The kind of things you have to think about is, how do these people get nominated, right? How do you choose who are your distinguished alumni? Because there's lots of people to pick from. what are those criteria? How do you get those names, right? And then who selects? Who are your distinguished alumni? Who goes through that process, and what kind of committee do you have? And then how do you recognize them? So is there some sort of wall in the building that has their picture and talks about the really great things that they've done in Black River Falls, and since maybe some of them don't live here, being outside of the community. So I am looking for people to join me in a journey of exploring what would work best for Black River Falls, and to create something that is going to help us have pride in what has those alumni that have come through our building and have done great things. So
we talked a little bit about the idea that the high school used to be the area where all community people came through when they're coming to all the sporting events, and now all of the varsity games are held at the field house, and so people don't even come into the high school. Yet, I think our community is incredibly unique. That Memorial Day, we're going to get about 300 distinguished alumni that come into the high school, and it is, I bet, out of the 10 years I've been in this role, I bet 8 of those years after that alumni banquet, I get an email from somebody that attended who says, there used to be a plaque with so-and-so's name on it. Do you have any idea where that went? Or there used to be a picture of so-and-so. And I greatly appreciate being able to honor history. There's no way we can keep every piece of artwork up that was ever given to the school. But in lieu of that, if there were something super thoughtful that was kept up to date and that the community could recognize, that feels very, very, very different. And so that's the idea. So we were really looking for if there was people on the board that were interested in having some conversations about a featured alumni each year that could join a distinguished group or whatever that is, some kind of display up at the high school to kick this off. We were interested in your input on that. Otherwise, we're happy to keep you informed along the way.
Do you remember when we were going to put posters around? Have you talked about that?
There
we talked about different fields and how to put them up in the high school, and this is how that child, high schooler looked when they were in high school, and this is what they're doing now, just to inspire kids to do some different areas. So I'm interested in it.
I don't go to high school every day, but wasn't there like a dozen or so different alumni that have like a description about them?
Yep, so I don't know if they're all alumni. We have like Sam Young. There's like a plaque for Sam Young and Warren Rosine, kind of in one of our like trophy cases as you walk through the main hallway. But a lot of it is like team trophies and things like that. It's not a lot of alumni recognizing and honoring those alumni that have come through. And like Mary Jo said, like trying to really make sure our students are aspiring for to do something, right? And so if they can see these are some great things that people who have graduated from here, lived here, graduated from here, and this is what they've gone on to do, or the great things that they did also in high school, right? Can help them aspire to do something.
I think this is a great idea because there's a sticky note on my desk that says recognize alumni, and I wasn't sure what to do with that idea.
You told it to me a long time
Did
ago.
I?
Yes,
Okay.
you did.
That sticky note's still in a stack of sticky notes.
Okay.
But yeah, I would be interested in helping any way I can.
It's a good idea.
Just a question. You have we have an annual dinner or supper. What is it? Luncheon actually?
The alumni dinner.
Is it a dinner? Okay. Are you incorporating that into part of this process as well?
Possibly,
Because
like when will we recognize them? What will happen?
Well,
it could be there.
Part of the obviously there's a lot of historical data that they would obviously bring to the table, and that would be something that.
Yeah. I obviously cannot be the person who picks the distinguished alumni.
Right.
I would know no one, right?
Right.
And so it's going to have to be a committee. It's going to have to be a team.
Right, and I think that's a great place to acquire that information would be from that group and probably actually some of the process as well.
Yeah.
That's a lot of stuff, and I don't think I have a qualification for it because I'm not graduating here either.
So like, what's the goal? Like,
The goal would be to have something in our school that helps students aspire to do something, right? And to see the great history that we have in Black River Falls, but also to just do more recognizing of the great things happening within our walls.
Because whoever gets recognized, they certainly feel seen and heard, right? And their family feels connected, all of those things too.
to kind of inspire people that, hey, maybe if I study hard and work hard, I can be somebody someday,
Yes.
And also we talk a lot, Luke and I, about how, and like Shelley mentioned, that everyone goes to the Linda Field House. This might be something, if it's housed in the high school, that people would come in to see, right? We want to see more people coming into our building.
And I really like the idea of recognizing people besides sports people. There's so many other things that have gone on in the community. So I think sports, they always get, not always, but often get recognized. Where we
And
can look
those people might still get
They
recognized,
still
right?
might.
But it's not
They
the only
absolutely might be the
criteria.
ones.
If you've ever been to Bangor, they have, I'm sure they started it long ago, I don't know how many they nominate each year, but there are hallways and hallways of 5x7 pictures because they do X number of alumni each year and X number of athletes that are part of a whatever, and so they have just a ton, and so it could be a discussion whether there's an athlete and another person, or yeah.
I like the idea.
Any other questions? Thanks, guys.
Right. 5.7, this is our CISA annual delegate. So this is the one that Mary Jo has served as in the past and can still. Is that correct? But we have the option to appoint someone else who doesn't.
She likes to do that,
Right.
so I'm good with it.
Would that be something, does it have to be at this meeting, or the only reason I bring it up is there's something that she needs to delegate between now and the May meeting, as far as CISA events that because I know that is it something CISA requires this and haven't done before May 1st or something?
They required it by April 20th. We were supposed to send them our delegate. I have no idea what that timing is for. That's just what they asked.
There you go, so it's a requirement, okay.
I think it's an invite, not requirement.
But it's a soft requirement,
Yeah.
I should say, okay.
Is there anyone that would like to do it?
I'm just checking. I don't believe I can make that work, so I can't do it regardless.
If she would accept it, I guess I would nominate Mary Jo to do that again. I think she would. She has to be there anyway. Unless someone would like to do it.
Then I will second that nomination. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? She is planning to watch us live. She just can't be here. All right, we've covered 6.1. We're into 6.2, employment recommendations. Sad to see we're losing another math teacher.
The school psychologist and sign language interpreter, those are fantastic to get locked in there. Sign language interpreter, we've been contracting through a third party, and that dramatically increases the cost of that. And so this is an individual who's relocating from the other side of the state to come next year to move to our community to be that sign language interpreter. So that is an incredibly unique skill that not everyone has. So
awesome.
Any motion to accept these? Make that motion, please.
I'll second. Further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right. We are through 7.1 up to 7.2. This was in our packet, not in this.
the CISA contract, it was just so.
It was in there.
Yeah. I made one change since it was added in. The one that is in there right now is accurate. The school counselors asked for the academic and career planning component to be added, and so that increases the page that was in your packets by $2,000. Let me find it.
And I just had a question. Do we contract through CISA for the library media specialist because we don't have that person on staff?
Yeah. So Kay Hendrickson comes and works physically in our district for those days. Mm-hmm.
It was just the older. I was like this 5.7.
Does anyone have any questions? Obviously, you know that the special ed ones are really non-negotiable. Those are all areas that we are legally bound due to IEPs. And we don't have a need for a full-time person, and so we purchase pieces or portions of individuals' time through CSAP. We're very excited to have that second full-time school psychologist on board so that we won't need as many services in that area. Because it is a new school psychologist, we will still need some oversight because there's a year of not practicum, it's you're fully licensed to do the work, but there's still an oversight for that.
So when you
first
say
year.
new, you mean brand new, newly licensed?
Correct.
Okay.
New to us and new to
Both of those, okay.
I think it's right we found those people.
Right.
It sure is.
Motion, please.
Yeah, we do need action for this.
I make a motion to approve the CISA contracts as presented.
I'll second.
Okay, motion second, further discussion? Right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? 7.3, student success report.
So I shared some slides with you with some data that is kind of hard to look at or to understand without context. Oh my gosh. Okay, so but the big idea in this data set is really thinking about school readiness for 4K students. And so there's these 3 slides, and the way that, like the context outside before I start describing the graph and what I want you to think about is when we're looking at a data set and we're thinking about populations, we want to think about the tendency of what 80% of the group will do. We want to predict about what 80% will do and what those levels are. So when you're looking at this graph, you see the boxes that are blue. That's where we're thinking about where about 80% of our kindergarten 4K or our 4K population should be. So that we're looking for 80% to be in the blue boxes. If you see numbers to the left, that's the percentage of students, those boxes are the percentage of students who are coming in to 4K below that grade level where we'd want students to be at. And if you see any of the students who are filled in to the right of the blue boxes, that would be above grade level. So this first slide takes into account skills that are social, emotional, and based, and physical. And you can, like, the subset of those skills are broken down. For example, from social, emotional, you see manages feelings. And physical, you'll see uses fingers and hands. And there's a lot of numbers up there, right? But what I can tell you is about 80% of the population is in the blue boxes. So the number on top is the actual student count. So you'll see in the expresses feelings category, there's 7 students that came in that were showing skills approaching grade level, but not quite there. And then there's a group of 25, 47, 2 that were at grade level.
Just to be clear, the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 across the top, those numbers don't mean anything. Those are just the different columns. So when she's talking about the numbers at the top, it's the number right above the percentage that tells you how many kids are in those boxes.
So that 1 through 13 at the top, that would basically be a rubric where your rubric
Yeah, it
lands
aligns
you.
with
But it is not grade level associated.
Or
Yep.
age or anything like that. It's talking about a criterion. So in both these, so this is good news. That's fantastic. So that we see that coming in. But then on the next side, what we see, we're looking at 2 different areas. We're looking at language and we're looking at cognitive skills. So in language, it's things like following directions, and in cognitive, it's things like attends and engages. Very important skills for being ready for school. And the story is similar, but you'll notice there's more boxes filled in to the left, not at grade level. When you add up the percentages in the blue boxes, it's between 70 and 80. So it's in the ballpark of where we want to be, but there's some fine tuning that could happen that maybe we could do some work in these areas to help parents and our community providers, our community partners help with that readiness, those readiness skills for our youngest children. So then the next slide is where we start to really think more about the prerequisite skills for our 4-year-olds when they're coming in. What are those skills that students would have so that they're ready for literacy and they're ready for math? And taking those academic skills on, and that's our business, right? Making sure that kids can read and do arithmetic. So these boxes, when you look at the blue for literacy, the first 3 boxes in literacy, about 20% of our students are coming in with those skills like rhyming
at what we want a 4-year-old to be able to do, to be ready to take on that reading, those reading skills. Writing name, we're doing really good. That's in that 80% criteria. They're showing us the skills there. But those really important other pre-literacy skills, we're seeing quite a disparity. And also, do you notice, not only do we have a lot of kids to the left, we have a lot of kids to the right. So that's really showing us an achievement gap before students even arrive in our doors. So we have kids all the way over on the not yet, and then we have kids coming in ready to rock and roll with those literacy skills. And the same for math. Math is a little bit better story. That blue area is between 30 and 55% of the population that's coming in. This is all data from this school year. So our 4-year-olds from this year. So this data set is from assessment that teachers do have done over a long period of time, and it gives us some really good information for our teachers for moving students forward, and it's telling us this interesting story of where some strengths are in our community and some areas of growth. And some of the ideas that we've been talking about is this is an opportunity for us to really think about talking with parents, putting some social media campaign type work. What are the skills that we really are hoping to see in students so that they're ready to learn to read and ready to learn what their backgrounding skill that will lead to more mathematical skills.
So our 4K, just so everyone remembers, is still half days, 4 days a week. We have boundary neighbor school districts who are all day, every day. 4K programming, and that is also another significant draw for families for both childcare and school readiness kinds of things. So these slides actually were put together for the childcare conversation, the task force, right? You presented at the business partnership to talk a little bit about when parents go to bed at night still uncertain where their kids are going to be, or the kids are unsure where they're going to be the next day. There certainly isn't an emphasis on, working on the rhyming, the nursery rhyme kinds of things, because they're just not able to find childcare where it feels settled and they can get at some of these things, which are all play-based for certain. And so just realizing that we're not expecting our 4K to come in as readers, but we're expecting them with some of those foundational skills that are the launch pad for literacy when they get into it.
Have we talked at all about perhaps going to all day for 4K, or is that just
It's
impossible
unfunded.
financially?
It's unfunded,
Financially.
and so that has been discussed sometimes in terms of the state budget. We would also have some space conversations that we'd have to have, because right now one classroom can serve 2 sections of 4K because they're both half days, so we would have to make some adjustments. I'm not saying it can't happen with the new spaces that were added at Forest Street, but it would take some work to make it happen. Right now it would be a funding.
It kind of goes right into the daycare problem too, for the other half of that day for those people. So, our kids coming behind it it's not a bad discussion to have.
That was the other part where we use this data that we, in our collaborative conversations with the Ho-Chunk Nation Education Department, they were asking when the gap exists for our students between our native and non-native, and we showed them that that gap begins before students even really formally enter our system.
Do you have those rubrics that drive those, like what a 1 to 13, 15, I guess that one is across the top? Do you have those in a format that you can send those to me? I'm just curious.
Melanie, you can maybe?
Yeah, it's in a bound book. I could, yeah.
I mean, I don't want you to spend a ton of time. I'm just curious to see what some of these, what does a 1 versus 7 versus a 14?
So I would not worry about the numbers across the top. The blue is where for each standard, so for each row, the blue is what you need to focus on. That's the grade level, the age.
Right.
Really, so it's not even a grade, it's an age level. Like what is the goal for that age level? And so by the time that student turns 5, they should master that skill by the time that they age out of that blue area.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, I'd just like to see the actual performance standard for what what are we expecting out of our 4Kers to be able to do?
And what the colors, what those numbers on the top show is that This comes from an assessment called Teaching Strategies Gold, and those numbers correspond to different age bands. And like the blue is for age 4. There's younger ones, so like 3 and 2, I think is yellow. I can give you those. They might not mean a whole lot though.
If you're looking for what skills they need, that's the descriptors on the left-hand side, not the numbers on top. So they could certainly share with you what they're being assessed on, which is the things on the left-hand side,
Right.
not across the top, right?
Yeah, I guess
Okay.
I'd just like to know like what scores a student, like in this one we have 3 students who are an 8, like what does an 8 on that scale versus a 1 on that scale
Sure.
look
So
like?
there's a bunch of behavioral data that teacher is collecting, observations in
So
the
this is a
classroom.
long-term assessment, this
Correct.
isn't like a sit down and
It is one-on-one administered, and do they do this twice or 3 times a year?
3 times a
Three
year.
times a year. So.
And it requires significant calibration because without that calibration, this assessment can really introduce a lot of subjectivity into it because it is observation based. And so they're looking for specific behaviors from the child.
Okay.
How many 4K teachers are there in the district?
We have 3 4K teachers right now, and so they each teach 2 sections.
4, is it? 6 different classes or whatever.
Yep.
I just included this slide just to stress the importance of that for age 5 of brain development. It's little information.
90% before age 5, that's impactful.
All right, there's nothing else for Nicole, thank you. That concludes the 7 series. We're up to 8.1 monthly expenditures.
Before we jump there, I just added in there the Wisconsin referendum results, just because that's something that we've been talking about a little bit. The last couple election cycles, the passing rate has been 80% and higher. This last spring, it was 58% of the questions that were asked were successfully passed. I just thought that that was interesting, that it was such a dramatic change. We had a conversation at admin kind of wondering why that might be. I personally feel like the whole biennium state budget is so up in the air right now that it would be really challenging to go to your community and talk to them about what your needs are when you really don't know what is going to be in the formula for the biennium budget. And so maybe that was part of it, maybe it is not, but just that's a drastic difference in success rate than where we've been probably the last 3-4 years. So. All right, now the monthly expenditures.
Questions? Questions?
Any questions for Jill? I will move to approve the monthly expenditures as presented.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Great. Policy committee, this is second reading of all of these. So they've been in your board package the last 2 months. Yep.
We make a motion to approve the policies as presented.
Second.
And a second, sorry. Further discussion on those? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, nutrition services audit.
Yeah, just wanted to give you an update. So we know that Connie Seeger does, I think, a really fantastic job, and she really is aggressive at applying for grants and programs in order to provide meals for our students. She takes advantage of opportunities, for example, the additional work that she put in to make sure that our elementary meals were free of charge to families this current year. Not all districts took the time to fill out all that paperwork and make sure they qualified, and yet she does that repeatedly because she wants to be able to feed our students. So we very much appreciate that. On top of being aggressive about finding ways to feed our students, she does an exceptional job with all of the paperwork and regulation and all of that stuff. And when I think about the work that we do as a district, her department is really one of the most regulated, with the incredible details about the meal planning and the, you know, amount of this, that, and the other thing that can be in it, and the substitutions and the careful menu planning, all of that stuff. And DPI does annual audits, and this year they came to the middle school, and they were scheduled to be here for 2 days or 3 days?
3 days.
3 days, and they only stayed for 4 days. Deanne says they were at the middle school for a while. They did not stay for 4 days, did they? They were here for 2 days, and when the auditor left, he had nothing but glowing reviews and said that there were 0 findings, and that they were confident that the rest of the buildings ran as smoothly and in such fine style as the middle school. And they just really gave some incredibly high accolades, because no findings is not something that they usually get to talk about. So I thought that was worth the recognition.
Another great job by that department. All right. Now for the really fun stuff. Budget recommendations.
Yep, so there's been a slight change since it went into your packet that we will talk through, but I'm gonna ask Jill to kick it off, talking about the big buckets that we see down on the bottom there.
Okay. So it looks a little bit different since the last time you saw it. What you saw the last time was just looking at option 1, we'll call it, just for lack of better, be able to point to the different assumptions. You know, we don't have the crystal ball. We're waiting to hear from the state to know what all of our parameters are for developing our budget. And that's probably going to be a while yet. So we had to make some assumptions on our own. So the top is just trying to compare next year's revenue limit with our current year's revenue limit, trying to find out how much new money we have to work with, right? A lot of those assumptions we don't know until September and October. So the biggest one is being our student count. Even bigger is knowing how much per pupil we're going to get next year. So looking at option 1, I've got the descriptions across the top. We are looking at 0 per pupil revenue limit and $0 for an increase in the low revenue ceiling, or low spending ceiling, excuse me. That was putting us in a hole before we even knew anything at $175,000. But we've been seeing that $0 per pupil revenue limit increase for the last few years. $200 per pupil revenue limit is kind of in, I guess, middle road. The governor's proposal is looking at $350 per pupil revenue limit. And again, we don't know if we're going to go that far or not, or receive those funds, but we wanted to just show, again, that vast, could be $175,000 in the hole, or perhaps we could have $231,000 to the good before we even start. So we're kind of taking the middle of the road at the $21,000 negative. And again, those assumptions are described over on the left side. What we did then is used our different basic things that we need to look at. Our salaries and our benefits, our 2 biggest buckets for our expenditures. And we had started looking at a 2% increase in salary, the salary pool. That doesn't mean everybody gets a 2% increase, but to fund our salary schedules that we have, 2%. That's in the green. That was $254,000. Last time we talked about 4%. So I've incorporated that in option 2 and option 3. That's $509,000. And then the next line is talking about our health insurance. We had heard that we were getting a 9% health insurance increase. Just today, Friday afternoon, Dr. Severson heard that there's some ways that we could reduce that by looking at an increase in our deductible. So we're still investigating that, but if we did do that and instead fund that through an HRA, instead have that higher deductible, fund that increased, I guess, liability, we'll call it, risk, through an HRA as we do now, but increase that amount, we could still save about another $70,000. So that's the number that you see there. What was in your packet was $70,000 more. So looking at it, still an increase of $187,000. We're going to continue looking at other options as well once we know all the state budget factors and see where we're at. We didn't forecast any savings in the new hire or retirement at this point. We use a lot of those dollars to fund our salary schedules. So it's kind of too early to say we can gravitate towards that. You approved in February the building budget allocation change. That was an increase of $1,400. The increase in voucher payments, that needs to match our revenue limit exemption. So on the revenue limit formula that was approved, or that the budget was approved off of this fall, there was an increase in an exemption for the revenue limit. These are for the voucher payments for the Wisconsin parental choice or the Racine parental choice. We also have an increased expenditure for that. That increased expenditure did not get into this year's budget. So we need to make sure we have that in there, so that's an extra expense for us, right? That comes off of our aid that's sent to those other districts then. We've tossed around and talked about the decrease in the HRA funding for our staff. So we would reduce the amount that we're putting into that employee HRA. We're not proposing that on option 2 at this time. Again, we feel like we need to know more of the factors, what the state budget is, and talk about that a little bit more. The next line item is, again, using some estimates and assumptions. In the green column, that's status quo for our special education aid. That's being aided at 30% currently, and that's what the green column, option 1, shows. Option 2 is showing something more like 45%, so a little bit of an increase from that 30%. And option 3 is looking at going all the way from 30% to 60%. So that would be what is in the governor's proposal. I don't know that we're going to go that far in one budget biennium, but we're looking at the 45% could be something that they look at. I know from a lot of the budget conversations that they're having those listening sessions across the state, that is something that most districts are asking for, to see some movement in that area. The next is our JAG person that we've had up at the high school. $30,000 of that, I guess contracted service we'll call it, was funded from Fund 10. And 10,000 of that was funded from Title VI. Do you want to talk a little bit more about that, Shelley, what the change was there in JAG?
Yep, so JAG, we have struggled to find the right person to facilitate the program well, and so the program has never really launched and established. We've not gotten the outcomes that we see in other districts that are operating JAG programs, and we've tried, it's been through 2 different high school administrators, and there's been a different JAG teacher each year, and we just have not seen the positive impact on students. And so since it was a small number of students without positive impact, in fact, I would say that there's been some negative influence on the culture within the building, it felt best to walk away from that program. So.
Then the last line item there is the addition of a first grade teacher. We do have more in kindergarten than we anticipated this year, and those kids moving to first grade would warrant another first grade teacher for next year. We have some dips. I can't remember if it's 2nd or 3rd grade. The reverse is true of the other grade, so we're doing a swap between 2nd and 3rd grade.
We need a 2nd grade to go down and increase by 3rd grade, but that we are taking off of the, it's a cost neutral because it's just moving from one grade level to the next.
And everything that we're talking about does not include our ESSER funded positions. Remember, we have interventionists, we have some teachers at the middle school, we have coaches that we're, instructional coaches that we're paying with ESSER funds as well. So those are not included in there because we have 1 more year of ESSER funds too.
And so a few things that I'd like to highlight just a moment, and then would love to answer your questions. This piece, the decreased HRA funding amount, so right now the district puts, just so everyone remembers, our 3-tier funding system, right? There's the premium paid, then it comes to the deductible. The employee has that first bit of their own share in it, and then the district puts money into an HRA account in that employee's name that they get to either use or keep for use at a later time. And then there's a 3rd tier that the employee doesn't get the money, but the district pays for it out of this pot of dollars. years. And that is that liability that Jill was talking about, because if we don't have a lot of people that reach that level of deductible, remember our premiums have been controlled a little bit more and staying, well, controlled as much as healthcare costs can be, I guess. We have been able to reduce our premium costs a little bit by continuously increasing our deductible amount. We've accepted that liability for the district and add to that budget amount as opposed to putting it on the backs of staff. And so I just want to remind everybody two things, and it sounds like they're in contradiction to each other. One, the CPI increase has been well above the salary percentage increases that we've given the last. It's been significantly higher the last 2 years for sure, but for years prior to that, it's been close, but we've certainly never topped that. So salary, it doesn't feel good to not give a significant increase in salary and take away part of their benefit, right? So also take away part of their HRA, that doesn't feel good. The other part of that, somebody who is a longtime respected staff member who always served on our insurance committee always used to say, every single employee benefits when it goes into salary, only some people benefit when it goes into benefit, because not everybody gets the health insurance. And so the reason that the admin team came up with a not recommending it this year, why there's a $0 amount there, is because we also haven't gathered an insurance committee to do an awful lot of work and digging into this recently. And so we committed to we don't know what the state budget is going to do. If that comes back terrible, that is something that we could always go back and talk about. And B, we committed to next fall kicking off an insurance committee to talk about what else we can do to start controlling some of our insurance costs. Because as you know, we get a report at the end of the year that talks about how many of our emergency room visits were really emergency or could have been handled in a different way. Each year, Security Health Plan makes some modifications as to swings in the program that they offer, don't offer, all of those things. And so we know that we can do a better job with employee education to also try to control those costs. And so we feel like right now isn't the time to reduce that HRA that we give to staff members. But the reason that we originally had 9% and now it will cost closer to 7% is an increase in deductible. So from a 4,000 single and 8,000 family, if we move up to a 5,000 single and a 10,000 family, we could save an additional 2% in premium costs. And so while we don't love increasing that deductible that much, anytime you can keep your premium rate down, that's value added, because next year it's a percentage of a higher number and so on and so forth. So that is why it's not recommended at this time, but the admin team talked about it a great deal and decided we were going to hold that for now until we knew a lot more information. And so when we've talked about the budget, I should let you ask questions first. Sorry. Questions about any of those recommendations?
I'm just glad you did take Jake out, as long as it hasn't been productive.
Obviously, option 2 is still in the red. I don't know if you all can see that. It's still in the red by $239,000. And the other thing we had talked about last time is, again, not knowing those state budget factors. This is certainly something that we could fund out of fund balance for 1 year. We certainly don't want to do that every year, and actually even in the past when we've said, oh, we'll take this a little bit out of fund balance, we usually haven't had to do that. Other revenues have come in, we've underspent, because I'm super conservative about that piece. Other expenditures haven't happened like we budgeted, so those two offsetting things usually makes our fund balance go up slightly. We do have a fund balance policy of 21% of our expenditure budget, where we've been above that, and we ended last year. And that's always a measure in June, because that varies every single month. There are months that get tighter, because you might say, well, why do we have such a big fund balance? Well, we don't have to short-term borrow to meet expenditures like some school districts do. So that helps us get through those months when we don't have the state aid coming in to help us out. So. But even with that small amount of it's 1% of a $22 million budget, we feel that we can get by this year doing that, or next year doing that.
And everything that we read about the state budget is that both parties are interested in in talking about particularly the special education funding. It would be fantastic. If you remember the chart that I showed, I think it was last month or the month before, that was all those districts that are considered low spending. And while we feel like it's targeted at us because we've been a low spender for so long, we saw how many districts in the state are considered low spending. There's been some additional movement on that as well that would be helpful to us. And remembering when those items go into the state budget, because of that complicated funding formula, there are some things that if they put the money in this way, it ends up hurting us because of declining enrollment and the safe harbor and all of those calculations. The cleanest way for us to get spendable dollars would be special education reimbursement significantly increasing. And that has been a promise since the inception of the revenue limits in '93. And so I really hope that there's some movement on there. So we are recommending to you an unbalanced budget this year. We've never, in my 10 years, well, more than that, 10 years as a principal too, we don't do that. However, we do feel like the biennium budget really is significantly different this year because of those ESSER funds that districts have that everybody knows are expiring. The budget is just really in a weird spot this time around. So we talked before, I'm just going to remind you that teacher contracts are supposed to go out in the spring. There are some districts who give teachers a contract with the exact same dollar amount that they earned this year, and they wait and see what the biennium budget comes out as, and then they vote on their increases for teachers after that is all settled. I will tell you, in the competitive market for staff, I am very concerned about the message that that sends to our staff, particularly after last year at a 7.9 CPI, and we did a 3% increase. But this year the CPI is 8.4, and we're recommending a 4% increase. So I really am concerned if they get a contract that has the same dollar amount they made this year with the promise of, we value you, we want you to be here, and we will figure out what we can pay you next year once we know our need.
And a couple, in case you're thinking about, well, what if we don't get option 2 at all, and it is option 1, we would still be able to fund that out of fund balance, or there are some other things we could perhaps slide some capital maintenance projects to our Fund 46 that you're aware of that we have. If we don't want to do that, but if we have to, we could do that. We could also use some ESSER 3 funds that we have and use those to help plug that budget hole for 1 year. Of course, that creates a really tough situation for the following year if we don't receive at least what's in option 2. Certainly option 3 would be wonderful, because that would help us with that following year as well.
I appreciate that you're always conservative on your numbers, because then usually, and I'm hoping it'll happen again, one of these meetings just like, again, good news, we've got more than we thought. So I appreciate you being conservative to start with.
Yeah, and that was going to be my exact question. I mean, what's the nuclear option? We don't get an increase and we give 4%. That's going to be what, almost $900,000 in shortfall.
Correct.
And then we have some room to make changes to the health insurance, right? Then we could not fund as much of the HRA so that the salaries that go to everyone would still compensate for that.
Like what Brad said, just the next annual budget will be the most tricky one, and that's where the pain will be felt, and that's where it boils down to. So we're hoping for the best outcome here, obviously. So
you hate to kick it down the road to future best problem, right?
I hate to leave people with any kind of issue in the future. But my only thing is recommending a negative one means that you're going to have to make up a gap somewhere on 2 of those scenarios. You're going to have to shift funding around, and so will the board have? I mean, when you go and do that, will the board have? At that point, will the board be part of that process and we're shifting funds around? Do you need approval to do that later on? I'm only asking because will that be another decision in the future? Like if you had to move 25,000.
So we could just you could just set the budget at $240,000 more in expenses than revenue. That automatically takes it out of fund balance.
Okay.
So when we're spending our funds throughout the year, it will come from fund balance. Okay. So that That's how that would work.
That's
So,
what I was getting.
yeah.
And so what the board approves is like the 100s, the 200s, right? What
Yeah.
gets printed in the paper, all of that stuff. And so that's, the board always approves any ads or cuts, you know, initially at this process, and then it's the 100s and the 200s and, you know, all of that pieces that goes in the newspaper and for board approval after that.
Okay. Yeah, I just say, just try to look out for the future here
Yep.
as much as possible, which I know you've always been very conservative, but I appreciate it. So.
And so the other thing to remember, we've talked about this before, and we have to keep talking about it. The district has been in reduction mode for 21 years, that we have been slowly reducing as a low spending district. I understand that it's not popular for everyone, but districts all over the state have gone to revenue limit override referendums, which literally means everybody who lives there, every single taxpayer gets to vote and decide whether they think that it is reasonable and feasible for the district to be able to spend above that. We believe that if we land in worst case scenario, that's what we will be doing. If the biennium budget comes out awful and we have to fill that gap for 1 year, that we will start talking about a revenue limit override referendum for next April. And again, remember, every single every voter gets a chance to vote on that. So that is the best opportunity for input, right? Everybody gets a vote. And so that would be next April that we would gear up for that. And if you think about it, I talked before about the 58% pass rate this time. They didn't know what the biennium budget was. Next year in April, we'll know what that next year is out in front of us. And we will know that our ESSER funds are falling away. And so we know that we're gonna have a hole when we look at all those positions that we're funding through ESSER. And so then it becomes this much bigger conversation next year about the ESSER funded positions as well as the hole that may or may not be created based off of the biennium budget. But that fiscal conversation becomes much larger. So we are putting it off a bit, but we're putting it off with the best information that we have available at the time and not wanting to risk losing a lot of staff by making them all wait. This definitely, we're asking for approval. So that the four, like whichever one, we're recommending option 2 is what we're recommending to you. We're recommending option 2 so that when Marty goes to print the contracts, we can figure out what those actual increases will be and they get their contract with their new salary rate on it.
Well, I'll make a motion to approve option 2 as the budget is presented.
I will second that. Further discussion or questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right, on to, we have meeting minutes. We're in the 9 series now. We have meeting minutes from last month.
Can we approve them all together?
The other minutes are closed session. We have to approve those in closed session, correct?
Yes.
So yes, we just need approval of March 27th.
You're good at it. Go ahead.
I make a motion to approve the minutes as presented.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? District admin report?
All right. Melanie has some highlights from 4th Street, so while she's coming up, I'm going to give you a couple of the other things. Some interesting things that I just wanted to share. So I received this postcard, and it is of the old 3rd Street School, so a very classic old postcard, and I just had to share the letter because I'm curious if one of you want to respond, otherwise I will. It is from Stockton, California. It says, some time ago I was at an antique store and found this circa 1950s picture card of your beautiful school building. I hope you enjoy it. How it made its way to California, we'll never know. At any rate, I hope it brightens your day. I said to myself, by golly, I'll send it back where it can be appreciated. Heritage is important. Post it up, it will start a nice conversation. Well, I gave $6, so if you want to give 7 or 8, it would be sincerely appreciated. Toss in a little postage if you want to. My dear wife, now passed, used to laugh at me and say, if you hear from those folks, you'll have to take me to lunch. He says, on June 26th, I'll be celebrating my 95th birthday. I don't know where all that time went, but I'm still strong as far as I know. And I like to call my little hobby redistribution of happiness. Our world sure needs it. Here's wishing you all the very best. And then he says, my daughter said you should look me up on Google, and I did. And this man has a hobby of going around and finding these cool old postcards, and then he reaches out and he sends them to him. So I am happy to pay the money. I just wondered if one of you would like to send a response back to Lowell, I don't know how to pronounce the last name, but from Stockton, California. I just thought it was super cute that he sent that. Yeah, he was great. Fantastic mail. And then we got a thank you card from Governor Evers and a congratulations on a fantastic Heart Spirits project that happened at the high school. And then I'm unsure if you all saw, we were talking about celebrating pride and excellence. This is the first annual Now Day banquet that is happening. So that is also something that Kim is helping facilitate at the high school, but a way to celebrate all of our kids who are earning those Now Day points ongoing instead of just waiting until their senior year. So recognizing their achievement along the way. The other things are May 3rd is our spring banquet for all of our staff, and it is at the Lunda Park. You are very welcome to join. If you're interested in being part of a lip sync, we are certainly down for that as well. And then May 10th is the next large family night that we could certainly use some volunteers at. So if you're available, that is going to be in the parking lot between Red Creek and Forest Street. We're headed into spring banquet season, as I said in my notes, so it's worth mentioning because we have so many community organizations that support our kids and want to recognize them. So the Lions Club banquet, that is really cool to go and hear what the staff have to say about each of those individual students. The Rotary Athletic Banquet, the FFA banquet is coming, and then Scholarship Night. Wow, if you've never attended, to go and see so many scholarships being given to our students is just unbelievable. The financial amount of gifts that come out of that high school is unbelievable, absolutely unbelievable. So all of those things start happening as we get closer to spring. And so Melanie is up.
So I thought I would talk about forestry and tie it to our 4 pillars of our strategic plan, actually. I'm going to skip the one about our facilities because I feel like we talk about that one a whole lot. Things are going good and in the right direction under that one, but under community engagement, I'm so happy to say that we finally got to celebrate our PJs and Pancakes night with Uncle Pancake. And I know that you were there. Did you catch your pancake?
I didn't catch any. My kids did though.
So that's Miss Penza there in the middle. I did not put the video in there because I'm actually sounding quite obnoxious in the video, so I just did a picture.
They made me try to catch them, just so you know.
I'm sure it took a lot of arm twisting.
She was gonna cheat and try and take the plate of pancakes and just walk up. We were like, no, you actually have to go and catch them. So we had 280 attendees, and it went very smoothly. We got a lot of good feedback from families. We added a couple extra stations so we could spread out a little bit and there wasn't a huge line. It was housed in our beautiful new cafeteria. We had tons of seating in our gymnasium, and it just went beautifully. So you can see we got a couple different activities there. We had lots of parents just doing activities right alongside their kids, and it was a fun night.
Awesome.
Moving under the student achievement pillar, I asked each grade level just to kind of highlight some things that they wanted to share and celebrate. And so 4K in early childhood wanted to highlight that recently they celebrated their 100th day. They had a fun day loaded with all sorts of counting activities. All of their students counted into the 20s and a few even into the hundreds in 4K, so quite the celebration. In kindergarten, in March, kindergartners went to the Eau Claire Children's Museum, and I'm not sure if you know this, but that museum recently opened this year after being closed, redesigned, and reopened after 5 years. And I'm happy to share that we also had a wonderful group of parents in attendance that were great helpers. You can see here some wonderful exhibits on animals, and they had just wrapped up a unit in literacy on farm animals and that, so it was a nice way to celebrate that closure. In first grade wanted to highlight some of the amazing work that they're doing in math and science. One of the guarantees is graphing in first grade, and as you can see, they're learning about graphing using jelly beans. And then in science, they're learning about animals and habitats, and that student on the right is actually learning about the effects of blubber in the tundra. So it's not, you can't see it too clearly up here, but he's got his hand in a Ziploc bag that's insulated in ice. So super engaging. I just wanted to highlight some of the day-to-day things that our students are doing for our students every single day. Some of these are examples of the ways that they've embraced at grade 8 at Forest Street to engage our students in high quality learning. I know that oftentimes when I get to come up here to the podium, it's to talk about testing, but these are wonderful, fun things that they get to do every single day. And so it's fun to get up here and just share the fun things that they get to do. And then our people, I wanted to take a minute and talk about two individuals that I haven't really got to talk about much. And this is new things to Forest Street this year. So we have rolled out in our specials blocks something called Learning Lab and something called Zenden. And these particular specials are actually run by two of our building aides that have stepped up and taken the lead on this. And the purpose of Learning Lab is to really hone in on the learning needs as a tier 1 support for what we're seeing across our grade levels and add additional support across that. So every grade level, every classroom comes to Learning Lab twice in a 6-day rotation, once or twice in a 6-day rotation, pretty sure twice. And in Zenden, the goal is to support social emotional learning and self-regulation skills, and every class comes to the Zenden once in a 6-day rotation. I believe I came here and maybe talked about this way back in the beginning of the school year, but we had a small group of staff members that were trained in a program called BRFSD that taught our staff to use a ball and a beanbag, one or the other at a time, to promote hand-eye coordination, self-regulation, and it helps them with that self-regulation, auditory processing. It also is proven to help our students become better readers and to track words. And so in the Zenden, Amanda Holcomb is the lead teacher in there and our building aide in there, and she works with kids in small groups and is introducing very slowly BRFSD in there. And then in Learning Lab, Rachel Hendrickson is our lead building aide in there, and she has worked on introducing Chromebooks to students. So when we have iReady testing, the kids are familiar with Chromebooks. She's also worked on tricky words. You can see a picture off to the right of the tricky words. So kids are getting extra support beyond the classroom on those. That comes right from the curriculum. They also work on fine motor skills. One of the toughest things that was a light bulb for me as a principal is hearing our teachers say that one of the hardest things to reinforce is fine motor skills. In the sense of using scissors, because that's one-on-one work that it's hard to get that time as a teacher to work on with their students during the school day. And so this has been a great opportunity. We have a lot of students, especially in kindergarten this year, that need that support. And so our Learning Lab has been a great opportunity for her to reinforce some of those things, holding a pencil the right way, using scissors because our kids have inappropriate grips, and it takes somebody going around and reteaching our students how to hold the scissors. And those are skills that we want them to have, and especially holding a pencil. So we've also incorporated fun additional science activities into our Learning Lab. So I just want to celebrate our two aides that have really done a phenomenal job on taking on these two areas for us. So
does that go on every day?
It does. Yeah. Any questions?
Those fine motor skills, that was another conversation where we said that would be a great spot next fall to zero in some volunteers, right?
Oh,
these are the times during the day, come in, help with the scissors, right? Some of those skills would be great. It is really warm in here tonight, isn't it? I feel like everyone's melting. I keep looking back, it's now 76, if anyone was wondering. I look out there and everyone's kind of melting, so I think I'm not the only one. Thank you. Thanks, Melanie.
All right. That's it for your report. 9.3 WASB, for the new members, there is that training tomorrow at 7, I think it is. I'm sure you guys have received 7. Yeah, I'm directing those questions to Marty. She has more information on that than I do. Any other WASB? All right, conference or workshop attendance?
This week is the Wisconsin Indian Education Conference, and there are 16 people from the district that are heading. So it's a nice mix of some of our support staff, some of our teachers, and some of our administrators. So that's exciting to be able to take such a big team to Madison.
And then school board connection opportunities, I think we just covered a lot of those.
Well, Tom and Mary Jo and I got to go to and Jill got to go to the history fair and do some judging, and it was fun because Eli brought in high school students that we paired up with, so that was fun to see that and to have the interaction with the high school kids. It was really good.
Tomorrow's the regional one that we're hosting for the first time in a really long time. Yeah, are you judging?
No.
Oh, okay. It's at the D1 Center tomorrow.
We must not got
We
promoted.
must not did a
Sorry.
Yes, I
didn't mean to talk about it then.
I'm glad you mentioned
Forget I said anything.
Awkward. Yeah.
Maybe it's not. Maybe I
I didn't get promoted after the math fair either, so don't do that.
But it'd be fun to see it.
Come on out.
D1's.
Future agenda item identification.
We start some of our end of year reports, but most of them are June. Your social calendars fill up if you're coming to the banquet season stuff.
And we've got our May 8th.
Yeah, special board meeting. So.
I've got some stuff that I owe you an email back on. I want to look at attendance, but I don't have time to look at that stuff before May 8th for sure. But I think we need to look at attendance in the future because I think that's definitely one of our lead indicators here.
If you would like, I could ask each of the buildings to put together a slide just talking about what their current initiatives are around attendance, and that might be a good launch pad for your discussions for our May board meeting.
Right. As always, if there's anything additional that Shelley or I know. All right. So now I'm going to, if there's no other business with the board, I move to adjourn into closed session pursuant to Wisconsin statutes 19.85 subpara 1 subpara C for the purpose of considering performance evaluation data of administrative personnel. And this is a roll call vote. And it will need a second.
I'll second that.
All right. Marty, if you would take roll, please.
Mary Jo Rosmanowski, Mary Jo Radcliffe,
Yes.
Nick Helsted,
Yes.
Tom Epps, Troy Webb,
Yes.
Ann Deemer,
Yes.
Brad Dodds.
Yes. All right. We're in closed session. We'll take a short recess then to allow us some time to move around.